Good evening, everyone. What a lovely crowd this evening. You do realize there's basketball on tonight, right? Uh, I, he's like, don't tell him. No, it's this is such a great testament to the wonderful community that you have here at Immaculate Conception. That I'm always humbled by the fact that anyone would come and hear me speak. But I'll share a few nuggets of wisdom with you over the next 3 evenings. As Father mentioned, my name is Everett Fritz. Uh, I am most known in terms of what I do with teaching the faith is working with young people. I'm most known for talking on the theme of discipleship, and I love talking on the theme of discipleship because I feel like the more I study the saints, the more I read in terms of the faith, the more I realize that those who become the holiest find the simplest paths. And I look at Jesus and I look at his message, and if I were to summarize it in 2 sentences, he says, "Come and be my disciple," and he says, "Go and make disciples." And so this is why I love talking about discipleship, is I'm like, that's a simple message. I can communicate that in 2 sentences. Come be my disciple, go make disciples. And so this evening, I want to start by actually digging into the perfect example of a disciple, which is Mary. She was the perfect disciple. She wasn't the first, but she was the perfect. And I think that she's a secret path. As I mentioned, I love simple paths because I'm a simple person and I need Jesus to make it stupid simple for me to get to heaven. Otherwise, I'm going to get lost along the way. And so the beauty of that, if you look at some of the great saints like St. John Paul II, his papal mantra was Totus Tuus Maria, which means Mary, I'm thine, and all I have is thine. Saint Louis de Montfort of France, who was famous for writing and promoting Marian consecration, he talked about Mary as the fastest, easiest, simplest way to Jesus. Saints like Saint Maximilian Kolbe and their incredible witness, and in his case, giving his life in the concentration camps in Auschwitz, he was known for, above all, having a Marian spirituality and being very big on promoting devotion to Mary. So, why is it that we Catholics are so big on Mary? It's like we figured something out along the way. Some people in our 2,000-year history of Christianity figured something out along the way, and they said, you know what? This is like a secret path. And our Protestant brothers and sisters, God bless them, who I love them, it's like they're missing out on something really profound and really simple and a great gift that Jesus has given us in his mother. So I want to get into that tonight. But first, I should say a few things about myself. So I hail from Denver, Colorado. Father mentioned I brought the weather with me. No, I didn't. It's spring in Colorado. You guys didn't get the memo. So I don't know what happened here. I was like, what? It's like almost April. What's going on? So put those winter coats away, guys. Maybe, I don't know, leap of faith. Never mind, don't do that. You'll freeze to death tonight. I am married to my wife, Katrina, who is my high school sweetheart. She was instrumental in my conversion to the faith. Although I was raised Catholic my whole life, I would say I didn't really start practicing, didn't really start believing until I was about 16. It's one of the reasons why I love working with young people, is because when you work, I think that uh, you love working with people around the same age. I discovered Christ when I was a young person, and therefore I love to bring Christ to young people as well. We'll put it that way. I have 3 beautiful children: my son John Paul, who's 14, my son Jude, who's 11, and my daughter Esme, who is 9. My daughter runs the household. Um, she is our little princess. And quite literally, we just got back from Disney World a few weeks ago. It was beautiful to see her meet the princesses and have conversations with them, etc. One of the things I love about my daughter is that her love language is really identifiable. Perhaps you've never heard of the term love language. There's a relatively famous book that talks about the way that people love, that we need to discern the different languages by which people love, meaning that, like, if your spouse might have a love language of service, and your love language might be affirmation, and if the two of you don't understand that you give love and receive love with those things in that particular way, then you tend to miss each other and feel like, oh, I'm not being loved. So it's a good thing to start to identify, okay, this is the language by which the person that I love feels loved. And so my daughter, it was really easy to identify her love language early on in her life because her love language is absolutely gift giving. She loves to give gifts. And from the young age of like 2 or 3 years old, I kid you not, like every day I'd come home from work and she would come up to me so happy, so excited. She would say, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy, I have a surprise for you." And I'd say, "What is it, Esme?" And she says, come with me. And she'd grab me by the hand and start pulling me upstairs. And lo and behold, inevitably, she'd gone into my closet, found something that I already owned, wrapped it up, and like my shoes, to present it to me, and so excited to watch me unwrap this gift. And I was like, "Oh, my shoes! Thank you, honey. Oh, I love my shoes. Thank you. I'm glad you gave them back to me." Um, we had to have a little conversation when she wrapped up my wallet one day. Anyway, but I mean, even to this day, she's 9 years old. I kid you not, I get a gift from her about once a week, at least. She just loves giving gifts. And if she loves giving gifts, like that's the way she gives love, you can imagine how loved she feels when she receives a gift. At least when she was like 7, 8 years old, on a daily basis, she'd ask me how long until Christmas or how long until my birthday, because she's just counting down the days. She just loves to receive gifts. So I know, like, I will. The boys get a little jealous because sometimes I'll give her a gift just randomly, just because I want her to feel loved. They're like, "Where's my gift?" I'm like, "That's not your love language. You don't get a gift." Uh, so there's but one day, I think on her 5th or 6th birthday, we decided to test how much of it is the receiving of the gift, like the toy itself, that makes it exciting, or is it just the act of unwrapping something and receiving like anything that makes it really exciting for her? So we decided to test this theory. My father-in-law went out on her birthday, and he took her birthday gifts and he hid them in a closet. And he went out and he got a stick from the backyard and he wrapped up that stick. And when it came time to present birthday gifts to her, he gives her the gift and she unwraps the stick. And she was so excited to receive this stick. And she went up and gave him a big hug, and she said, "Thank you for my birthday stick." And we were just chuckling and laughing, etc. No, that's not your real gift. We got real gifts for you, etc. But then at the end of the night, when we were leaving the grandparents' home and we were packing up her stuff and loading it in the car, she said, "Don't forget my stick." And I said, "Honey, I'm going to take the stick. I'm throwing it back in the backyard." She says, "No, that's my birthday stick. You can't get rid of my birthday stick." And I was like, "Honey, it's a stick." And she's like, "That is my birthday stick. And forever now, that stick is enshrined. I can't get rid of the stick." So, I mean, I have to be careful what I give her because, like, she just collects things and you can't ever throw it away. I love this about my daughter because it's really easy to teach her about the faith uh, in terms that she can understand. Because I feel like so often we get lost in our faith with the teachings and the catechism, and we forget the simplest of message, that Jesus comes to us and gives us a gift freely. He gives us the gift of salvation. He gives us the gift of his love. He gives us the gift of the forgiveness of our sins, and it's all free. It's a gift. And that's what I hope to be able to share with you this evening, is that, and over the course of 3 evenings, is just the gift of being able to present to you the love of Jesus Christ. And that's the foundation of what it is that we believe. If you miss that, you've missed the entire point of our faith. Like, forget all the teachings, forget all the other stuff. Like, that's the most important thing. Jesus loves you so much, and it's a free gift. It's entirely free to you. Anyway, as I mentioned, this evening I want to talk to you about the gift of his mother. Uh, the craziest person I've ever met in my life was a man named Dennis. I met him when I was a freshman in college. And I had just recently started really getting into my faith, becoming really devout in my faith, loving Jesus. But Mary was kind of a foreign concept. Not that I didn't know, hey, we love Mary in the Catholic faith, but the why behind it never seemed to resonate. And I was a freshman in college, and I met up with some Catholics who also had a devout faith like myself. And several of the older students said, "Hey, we have this group that goes over to this guy's house on a Friday evening, and we pray the rosary at his house." And I'm like, "Well, that sounds kind of boring on a Friday night in college." But I mean, that gives you an idea where I am, right? But they were like, "No, it's really interesting." And so I go and I went with them, and it was this man and his family, and he had 9 kids. And he had this little itty bitty house off the campus, and we went to his house, and we prayed with him, and he would tell us stories. And what I found out about this man, I was like, oh, I realize now why they like to spend time with this man. Like, he was the craziest person I've ever met in my life. And I mean that in the most charitable, loving way possible. But to give you an idea of what I mean by crazy, like, I walk into his home, and it was a very old home. And back in those days, the way that the homes were built is small rooms. It wasn't like big open floor plan. And he had 9 children. And so you walk in, the kitchen's small, the living room's small. You can kind of guess the bedrooms are probably small. And then we walk back, and there's this big chapel-like room in his house, which was clearly an addition. Like, this wasn't an original piece of the home. And I kid you not, looked like a chapel. I was like, who has a chapel in their house? And they had this giant statue of Mary, and they had candles, and they had pews, and they had beautiful art on the walls. And I got the impression too that this man was not a wealthy man. And I'm like, who decorates their home with like church art? So I asked Dennis one day, like Dennis would tell story after story after story of God providing profoundly in his life. And one day I said, Dennis, tell me about this chapel. Like, where did it come from? And he says, oh, I built it. He said, I realized, he says, we have a very small home, and I have 9 children, and I wanted a place in my home where all of us could gather comfortably and pray together as a family. And I didn't have a room like that, so I built this addition onto my house. And I asked him, I said, oh, are you like a carpenter, or are you a construction worker? Like, what's your background? He says, no, I know nothing about building anything. I just realized that St. Joseph was a carpenter, so I prayed to him for inspiration, and then I just started building it. And I thought, oh, the ceiling's going to collapse on us. Like, that's a terrible idea. And I'm like, wait, what? And he's like, oh, he says, I went to a friend. I said, I want to build this thing. He donated lumber to me. I Googled up like how to build walls. I talked to a couple people about how to nail things together. And then I just started building under the inspiration of St. Joseph. And I was like, wait, like, how is this room still standing? And he says, oh, don't worry. He could see the look of horror on my face, and could see I was anxious. And he says, oh, don't worry. He says, when it was all said and done, I had a friend of mine who's a contractor come in, and we did all the inspections and everything. And he says, after inspecting the room, he said to me, he's like, I'm amazed. He says, this looks like it was built by a master carpenter. In fact, he says, the way that it's built is almost too perfect. He says, this chapel could actually act like a bomb shelter in the way that it's like built. It's so sturdy. And I was like, well, that's remarkable. And so then I asked Dennis, I was like, tell me the story of like all this church, this really expensive looking church art that's in your, I was like, this must have cost you a fortune. And he says, oh, no, it didn't cost me anything. And I said, oh, do tell. Uh, so we were close by to a university campus that had a very beautiful basilica. And he says, one day I was on a walk. I was just about finished with the chapel in my home. And I was walking by the basilica, and I saw them loading a bunch of church art into a truck. And he said, he asked, he was like, wait, what's going on here? And they said, oh, we're redecorating the basilica. There's a big renovation going on. And he's like, so what are you doing with all this old art? They said, oh, it's just going to go into storage. We're replacing this. And he says, it's just going to sit in a storage room? And they said, yeah. He said, can I have it? And they were like, you'll take it off our hands? He says, yeah, if you'll give it to me for free. And so they gave him all this art from a basilica that is in his home and in his chapel. And like it's an amazing story how he built this. But the thing about Dennis is he had story after story after story like that. Dennis was the kind of person that I've never met anyone like him, where when Dennis would go to the Lord and ask him for something, it always happened. Like I had a friend who Dennis was leading a pilgrimage to a Marian pilgrimage site, and I had a college student friend who, college students dirt poor, and she says, I really want to go. And he's like, okay, then you're coming with us. And she's like, well, I don't have any money. It's like $5,000. And he's like, and it's all due by Friday, too. She had just found out about this. He says, don't worry, we'll pray, and you'll have $5,000 by Friday. And lo and behold, my friend, like money just started randomly showing up in her mailbox. Well, not just like one check, but like several throughout the week. And by the end of the week, she had $5,000. Like stories like that, well, Dennis had in spades. And so I asked him one day, I was like, Dennis, what's your secret? Like, what is it that you're doing that all of us aren't doing in prayer? How is it that you have this like direct line to Jesus and you get whatever you ask for? He says, oh, I go through Mary. He's like, I just pray to Mary. And I was like, well, yeah, you and every other Catholic. What's the difference? He says, no, you don't understand. He says, I go to Mary with everything. Everything I go to her with. And she takes it and she presents it to her son and perfects it. St. Louis de Montfort talked about this in Marian consecration. He says, if you do Marian consecration right, you're supposed to give everything to Mary, understanding that your intentions, your desires, the people that you pray for, everything that are imperfect. But if you give them to Mary, she'll make them perfect, and then she'll present them to her son for you. And then you give her all of your service, all of your heart, everything that you do. You said, this is all for the glory of the kingdom of God. Mary, use what I do and dispose of it according to what you think is best. Like that's the concept behind Marian consecration according to Louis de Montfort. And so Dennis embodied this. He's like, I literally trust Mary with everything. He says, start doing this. He says, pray the rosary every day. He says, and if you forget, he's like, don't forget. He's like, do not go to bed at night unless you have prayed the rosary. He says, and if you're so tired, it's like, at least pray a decade. That only takes 5 minutes to do. He says, and then start just giving her everything, all of your intentions. He's like, don't go to Jesus with him, go straight to Mary with him. He's like, and just, you'll watch what she does. She'll transform everything. And I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. And lo and behold, I found that as I did that, I took him at his word. I'm like, I've seen the results, Dennis. I'll try this. And the more I would present things to Mary, the more I found she transformed my prayer life. And the faster I found, not just like, hey, Jesus, I want to win the lottery. Like, I don't need to win the lottery. But like, Jesus, like, I want to grow closer to you. Mary took me closer. I'm going to explain to you how that happened throughout. But I'll tell you one quick story of how just seeing the results in my own life of something very simple. Because it wasn't just Dennis. Once I started praying to Mary, I started seeing the same thing. When I was a freshman in college, not freshman, when I had just gotten married, so I had just graduated college and I got married and I took my first job in the church as a youth minister at a parish in Florida. And I had just been married like 3 weeks. And when you graduate college and then you move to your first job and location and you're married, you have nothing. Like everything we own, we could fit in the back seat of our car. And so we get an apartment. And we had no money because we had just graduated college. And so we ended up putting whatever money we had for first month and last month's rent, as you do when you're young. And so pretty quickly I realized when we were in our apartment, I was like, oh, it's empty in here. And you don't realize how much you take a dinner table for granted until you don't have one. Like we were eating for the first week our meals off of cardboard boxes. And so parishioners, I worked at a parish, and parishioners figured out pretty quickly, oh, they're young and they have nothing. And so people started coming to us and saying, what do you need? And we said, well, we need furniture. And people started donating, an end table here, a couch there, a dinner table, etc. So none of our furniture matched, but we got what we needed. And we really thanked the Lord for it, because we're like, Lord, you provided. Like, we don't have any money to go out and buy furniture. Well, the one thing the Lord didn't provide was a bed. So for the first week of my marriage, we were sleeping on the floor. Then we went out to Target. We got an air mattress, and we slept on that for a couple of months. And after about a couple months of sleeping on an air mattress, it's not particularly comfortable. And so finally, like we had saved up enough money, and I said to my wife, I was like, honey, let's go out and buy a bed. Like I'm tired of sleeping on this thing. She said, Jesus has given us everything already. Why would you think he was not going to give us a bed? And I said, honey, we can afford a bed. Let's just go out and buy one. She said, tell you what. She's like, Mary knows, and Mary will get it for us. And me of little faith, even though I had seen Mary provide for me many a time over, I was just like, honey, let's go to get a bed, for crying out loud. She says, no, let's do a novena. I was like, fine. So we did a novena, praying to Our Lady. I was like, okay, 9 days. And in 9 days, when we don't have the bed, then I can say to her, honey, like, let's go out and get a bed. So we prayed to Mary and we said, please provide for us a bed. 9 days go by, nothing happens. But we were really busy, couldn't get around to it. A couple weeks go by. And finally, after a couple weeks, I was like, honey, we prayed the novena, nothing happened. Let's go get a bed. And she said, well, we're about 2 weeks or 2 days, 2 or 3 days until Christmas. And we're going to go back to see family, leaving where we were at for Christmas. And she said, tell you what, if we don't have a bed by the time we get back from Christmas, we'll go buy one. I said, deal. So the next night, we're 2 days away from leaving. At about 11 o'clock at night, I get a random phone call, and it's a parishioner. And we hadn't told anyone, hey, we're in need of a bed. And this guy said, hey, I'm so sorry to bother you late at night, but this is just really strange and random, and I was praying the rosary tonight, and then I tried to go to bed, and I cannot go to sleep because this thing just keeps popping in my head, and it's bothering me so much, I just have to call you. He says, I was praying the rosary, and in the middle of the third decade, I felt like Mary was saying to me, you need to call up Everett and give him money to go buy a bed. And he's like, and it will not go away, so I'm calling you up. And he says, does this, he says, I'm so sorry, this is so strange. I said, no, it's not strange at all. And I told him the story. He's like, well, that's really amazing. He's like, come over to my house. He's like, I don't have much to give you. And he gave me a check for $300. Which I was so grateful for. I was like, that's really amazing. And I come home, I show my wife, and now $300 won't buy you much of a mattress, but it was like, this is something, this is great, how beautiful of a story. Now, I mentioned that was 2 days before we were going to leave. The next night, the day before we were going to leave, we were out with a couple of friends of ours. They were pregnant with their first child, and the wife she was like little petite, like 5 foot nothing, big bowling ball of a belly walking around, and clearly very uncomfortable. And she was kind of complaining a bit, and she said, oh, I'm so ready to be done with this. She's like, I'm just so uncomfortable being pregnant. And I was talking about that for a minute, and she says, you know what bothers me the most? And she says, this is really weird and random, but she says, the thing that bothers me the most is getting out of bed at night to have to go to the bathroom. And I was like, what do you mean by that? She says, well, we have this bed, and it's this gorgeous mahogany wood bed with a canopy and everything, but the mattress sits up really high. Like I have to like climb up on a ladder to get into it. She says, and getting up in the middle of the night multiple times, like in and out and in and out. She says, I literally have to jump into bed with my bowling ball of a belly. She's like, and I'm just sick of it. She says, the funny thing is we have multiple beds in our house. I just want to get rid of this thing. And I turned to her and I said, I'll give you $300 for it. And she said, really? And I said, yeah, I'll give you $300 for it right now. And she's like, all right, deal. So I go to pick up this bed. It's mahogany wood, like gorgeous red. I mean, it was just like the most gorgeous thing I'd ever seen. I bring it home to show my wife, and my wife was like, this is like my dream bed. And that was, she was like, you go to Our Lady and she provides. She takes care of it. Why? Why does it work? It's in the scriptures. And it's again, I said this is top secret stuff. Our Protestant brothers and sisters are not privy to this, but it's right in the scriptures. It's right there. I remember talking to a Protestant brother of mine who, evangelical, very devout, faithful man, but we got on the subject of Mary. He's like, I don't get you and Mary and stuff. And I said, what do you mean? He's like, she was just some normal, everyday lady like everybody else. And I thought to myself, oh, you haven't read the Bible. She wasn't normal like everybody else. It's right in the first 3 chapters of Genesis, immediately following the fall. And I'm cherry picking here in terms of the Old Testament and references to Mary. Like there are all kinds of references to a woman that is coming, or foreshadowings of a woman that is coming. But immediately right after the fall of man and Adam and Eve, God talks about the repercussions of sin. And he leaves us, though, with a promise. In Genesis 3:15, he says to the serpent, I will put enmity between you and the woman and your offspring and hers, foreshadowing what's to come. That eventually there will be some enmity, meaning no common ground, meaning that the serpent, who is Satan, there will be somebody that will come that will crush his head, as it says in 3:15, that has no common ground with him, no sin. Of course, we know that he's talking about Jesus, but before he talks about Jesus, he says, I will put enmity between you and the woman, not between you and my son. He says, you and the woman and your offspring and hers. He talks about a woman that is to come in the very first 3 chapters of Genesis, before he ever talks about Jesus. And he says that not only will his son have no common ground with Satan, but the woman will as well. And so there's a foreshadowing, a prophecy really, of a woman that is to come. And one of the most common Old Testament references that we know talks about Mary is in the prophet Isaiah, talking about the virgin who will be with child. And she will name him Emmanuel. I mean, we know that it's read every Christmas season, that there is a virgin that will give birth to a son. And we forget, it's like, no, like the fact that that was 500 years or more before it actually happened is really significant. That for hundreds and hundreds of years, it wasn't just a son that was coming, someone that we were looking for, the eventual successor to the line of King David, but the woman first, that there would be a virgin mother, that there's somebody to come. When the angel Gabriel appears to Mary, he says to her first, "Hail, favored one," which if you ever get some flack from other Christians who say, "I don't get the Hail Mary, how can you ever pray to Mary?" You say, "I'm just quoting Scripture." Hail Mary, full of grace. And not only are you just quoting Scripture, you're quoting the angel Gabriel, who's a messenger. Who's he a messenger of? God the Father. So all he's doing is articulating the very words that God the Father has said to say, go say these things to Mary. And he calls her, Hail Mary, full of grace. If God can call her that, so can we. I feel pretty strongly that I'm not speaking heresy if I'm simply repeating the words of God. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you. This is not some common everyday person. She's not just like you and us. Full of grace, the Lord is with you. And then we know in her cousin Elizabeth says, "Blessed are you among women, blessed is the fruit of your womb." Referring to Jesus, after her own child leaps in her own womb. Mary is special. There's another reference to Mary that I think is really important, and it's one that a lot of people miss. In Revelation chapter 12, verse 1, there's this vision post-resurrection that St. John has of heaven. And it's the final book of the Bible. It's called the book of Revelation. It's apocalyptic literature, so there's a lot of symbolic things. But basically all he does for several chapters is describe, here's what I'm seeing in my vision. And in Revelation 12, verse 1, he starts speaking of a woman that he sees. And it says that he sees a great sign appeared in the sky, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was with child and waited aloud in pain as she labored to give birth. Then another sign appeared in the sky. It was a huge red dragon. And it goes on to talk about how the red dragon tried to take her offspring, and it wasn't successful. So the red dragon, it goes and tries to wage war on the rest of the offspring of the woman. And again, talking to my Protestant brothers and sisters, I'm like, it's right there. You see in the vision of heaven, a woman with a crown, for crying out loud, and the sun and the moon and the stars, and she's got a child. And I was like, they're talking about Mary, and she's got a crown in heaven. How could you not think she's significant? And they're like, that's not Mary. That's Israel. They said the child came out of Israel, not Mary. And I said, you're missing something, though. There's something that we miss. There's no chapters when John wrote down the book of Revelation, as with anything else, they didn't put chapters in. They weren't like chapter 1, the end, start chapter 2. As later on, chapter separations got put into the Bible. I hate where the chapter separation got put into this passage. Because chapter 12 starts with a great sign appeared in the sky, a woman clothed with the sun, etc. But the verse right before that describes an event that happens in heaven. And again, John's just saying, here's what I see. And he said, then God's temple in heaven was opened, and the ark of his covenant could be seen in the temple. There were flashes of lightning, rumblings and peals of thunder, an earthquake, and a violent hailstorm. And then he says, a great sign appeared in the sky, a woman, etc. He says, the Ark of the Covenant. Now, maybe you're really familiar with Old Testament and the Ark of the Covenant. Maybe you've just seen Raiders of the Lost Ark in Indiana Jones. The Ark of the Covenant should ring a bell. You're like, I've heard that somewhere. The Ark of the Covenant was what held three things. It's from the Old Testament. It was started with Moses because it held the Ten Commandments. It held a piece of Aaron's staff, symbolizing the priesthood, and it held a manna from the desert, literally the bread that came down from heaven. They put that into the ark, and it was considered, basically, before we had Jesus, like the representation of God on the earth. And quite literally, all throughout the next 100 years, the Ark of the Covenant, it was in the center of the temple. It was the most sacred of things. It was made with the purest of gold. They would take the Ark of the Covenant into battle with them. And if the Ark was with them, they would win the battle. If the Ark was not with them, they would not win the battle. This is why in Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is all fiction, but this is why supposedly the Nazis were trying to find the Ark, is because they read the scriptures and they realized, oh, we win battles when the Ark is with us. Great weapon. That was the idea. But I was like, that's crazy talk. But the idea was like the ark was really profound. It says here in Revelation chapter 11, the ark of the covenant enters heaven. And then John describes what it looks like. And he says, I see a woman clothed in the sun, standing on the moon with a crown of 12 stars. That's what the ark looks like. The ark of the new covenant was not a piece of metal and gold. The ark of the covenant was Mary's womb. That in her womb, she carried inside of her the new law, the bread that came down from heaven, and the royal priesthood of Jesus Christ. Mary is quite literally the embodiment of the new covenant, the ark itself. And this is why the old Ark of the Covenant was made with the purest of gold. God made Mary with the purest of materials. God made Mary pure and beautiful and powerful. And when we go into battle with Mary, we win. Like, that's the significance of Mary. She's the ark. Quite literally, in our teaching, as Catholic teachings, Mary is the crowning achievement of all creation. So women, if you've ever heard, you're like, our church doesn't take us seriously. I want you to know this, and historically we can say all kinds of things that are absolutely true to that. But in church teaching, you are the crowning achievement of all creation, and the absolute best version of you was Mary. But if you ever, if you can go home and you can say this to your husbands. If your husband's not here tonight, they say, what did you learn from the speaker this evening? I learned that God created me better than you, and you are right. I kid you not. That is true. You are the perfection of humanity. And he's like, what? No, if you really think that, got men, you're like, wait, what? Women are better than us? Like, men, let's be honest with you. Have you looked at yourself in the mirror, and then have you looked at woman in the mirror? Who's more beautiful? Like, who's more perfect? Let's be honest here. I mean, if men are being honest, it's like, yeah, seriously, women are the crowning achievement of all creation. It's true. So why, then, does it work that if you go to Mary with everything, you get what you want? It mentions in Revelation 12:1, she had a crown of 12 stars. That crown is significant. I'm going to read to you a passage from the Old Testament, because the queen has a role in the kingdom. Jesus always talked about, when he talked about what heaven was like, when he talked about what the church was going to be like, when he talked about what he was here to do, he would always talk about it as it was a kingdom. And the people at that time would have understood the structure of their kingdoms. And I had my Bible open to where I needed it to be, and now it's not. So I'm going to have to stall as I try to find it. 1 Kings 2. Back in the time of Jesus, kings had many wives. And there was a queen in the kingdom, but there could only be one queen. And if they had many wives, it's like, well, then who ends up being the queen? It is a relatively new concept in our civilization. Well, monarchy has largely gone away in general around the world, but we think of the queen as the wife of the king. Like that's a relatively new concept. Back in the time of Jesus, the queen was not the wife, the queen was the mother. And so, actually, if you read through the Old Testament, there are times when there's a dispute over who's going to be the rightful king after the king dies, and the mothers start leveraging for position because they know, like, I'm going to be stand to inherit the kingdom as queen if my son becomes the king. And the queen mother has a role in the kingdom. And if you look at King Solomon, there's this story because his mother was Bathsheba, and there's this story that shows both the role of the queen mother in the kingdom and about the honor that he shows to her. It says, Then Solomon sat on the throne of David his father, and his kingship was established. Adonijah, son of Haggith, came to Bathsheba, that's his mother, the mother of Solomon. Do you come in peace, she asked. In peace, he answered. And he added, I have something to say to you. She replied, Speak. So he said, You know that the kingship was mine, and all Israel expected me to be king. But the kingship passed me by and went to my brother. By the Lord's will, it went to him. But now there is one favor I would ask of you. Do not refuse me. And she said, Speak on. He said, Please ask King Solomon, who will not refuse you, to give me, I can't pronounce these names, Abishag the Shunammite to be my wife. Bathsheba replied, Very well, I will speak to the king for you. Then Bathsheba went to the king, Solomon, to speak to him for Adonijah, and the king stood up to meet her and paid her homage. Then he sat down upon his throne, and a throne was provided for the king's mother, who sat on his right. She said, There is one small favor I would ask of you. Do not refuse me. And the king said to her, Ask it, my mother, for I will not refuse you. I'll stop there. You look at the way the king treated his mother. She enters into his throne room. He rises to meet her in honor of her. He has a throne put right next to him. And then he says, Whatever you ask, basically, I will not refuse you. That was the role of the queen mother, is the queen mother would be almost basically an intercessor for the people. The people would go to the queen mother and they would make a request because they knew that the king would not refuse the queen mother. And so they would say, if you go to your son and if you say to him, please give this a thing, it'll happen. And that's what Solomon shows it perfectly. That's what the role of the queen mother is. Jesus is king. By nature, the fact that Mary is his mother, she becomes queen of heaven and earth. And her role in the kingdom of God is to take whatever we give to her, perfect it, and take it to her son. And he says to her, Whatever you ask of me, I will not refuse you. This is why I can go to Mary and say, I need a bed. And she goes to Jesus and she says, he needs a bed. And I get a bed. I kid you not. It works. Like, I thought it was crazy, but it works. Like, that's her role in the kingdom of God. This is why, like, Dennis was like, pray the rosary, pray the rosary, pray the rosary. Get close to Mary, as she will be your best friend. She will take you to Jesus. I kid you not. And I was like, all right, I trust you. I believe you. It's true. Second thing I learned about the Queen Mother, let me back up for a second. We love to build statues in the Catholic Church. I have never seen an image of Our Lady, of Mary, that I like, ever. Like, ever. Like, when I picture Mary, I think of the most beautiful woman ever. I think of this queen, this mother, this nurturer. But there's also a reality that, I mentioned the Ark of the Covenant gets brought into battle, and we win. By nature of the fact that she's queen and mother, she's queen of heaven and earth. That means she's queen of the angels. That's one of her titles. Queen of the angels. In fact, the crown of 12 stars that's mentioned in Book of Revelation, stars symbolically in the Book of Revelation represent angels. And so the fact that she has a crown of 12 stars means she's the queen of the angels. When Mary is, if you need to win a battle, Mary is the best person to go to. If you've got a battle, if you've got spiritual warfare, if you've got struggles and suffering in your life, go to her. She wins those battles. just to give you an idea of just the power, Satan hates Our Lady, hates her to death. And there's a reason why. But there is a story real quick. I was praying outside of an abortion clinic years ago, and a friend of mine had asked me to come with him. And we were praying outside of a Planned Parenthood clinic in Colorado. Down the street from that clinic, we have we have an alternative center set up, provides full medical care, provides everything that women need, et cetera. And it's just down the street. And they have this little box set up that has these flyers in it. And in the flyers, it has all the information of here's where you can get free services. So they ask people to come grab the box because around this Planned Parenthood abortion clinic, there's this fence, so you can't get in. So we just stand at the front of the fence and try to catch people as they're coming out of the clinic and hand them information like here's where you can go for post-abortion counseling, here's where you can go for abortion pill reversal. Like we try to help them any way we can, either before or after, trying to help these young women in crisis pregnancies. So I go there with my friend, we go there to pray, and he's like, let's start praying to Mary. And we pray to Mary, and in particular, we pray that Mary would bind Satan in the hour that we were there to pray. And then it occurred to me, I was like, oh, let me go get the box of flyers. So I go and get the box of flyers, I come back, and car after car starts coming out. It was about the time that surgeries were ending. So people were leaving and the cars were coming out. And I just stood there, and I started holding out a flyer that it looks like, hey, I've got something to show you. And they would roll down their windows, and I would hand them the flyer, and I would say to them, as you know, you got about 10, 15 seconds to get your message through. And so I would just say, hey, like, we want to support you. There's some care down the street. Here's some list of things, like, what can we do to help, et cetera. But by the end of that hour, I'd handed out all the flyers. So I was like, I need to tell them they need to restock their box. So I go to our clinic, and I go to the front desk, and I said, hey, we're out of flyers. You guys need to restock. And they said, wait, what? And I said, yeah, we're out of flyers. They said, what did you do with the flyers? I said, well, I handed them all out. They said, there were like 20 or 30 flyers in there this morning. I said, yeah, I handed them all out. They said, wait, what did you do? And I was like I was surprised. I was like, what do you mean? Like, that's what we're supposed to do, right? And they're like, we can maybe get one car to stop and take a flyer maybe once a month. They said they just drive right past us. And I was like, well, we prayed to Mary, and we prayed for binding of Satan during that hour. And I said, and all I did was stand there. And honestly, I don't think I'm that attractive that I just stopped traffic. Like, I was like, I just held out my hand, and I was like, I got something for you. And they were like, that's amazing. Okay. It's like I didn't do anything. But there's I was like, Mary has this power over Satan. Why? Why does she have this power over him? My imagery of Our Lady, as mentioned, like I've never seen an image of Our Lady that I like. Because every image of Our Lady that I see, it's like Mary with her hands out and she's very meek, or she looks very plain, or she's holding baby Jesus, and that's all fine. But like I envision Mary as like this gorgeous, like she stops, like all of the nations would bend at her beauty, they would fall to their knees. But not only that, I imagine someone who's fierce, who conquers Satan. Like, I think the best imagery of Our Lady, like the closest thing that fits my image of her in my head is J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. There's a moment, Tolkien was, Lord of the Rings, very popular movies based on books that Tolkien wrote back in the 1940s. And he was a very devout Catholic. He created this fantasy world and this whole story about good versus evil and trying to destroy the ring and etc. And but he would pull things out of our Catholic faith and kind of intertwine it into the story because he was Catholic, that it just kind of fit. Like that's what he was pulling from, his worldview. And there's this character in the third book that I think perfectly embodies Our Lady of Mary in the way that I see her, and it's the soldier, the Eowyn. All of the men were going to battle to fight the evil, Sauron and his like army of orcs, etc. And this woman wants to go to battle as well. And they said, no, you can't come, you can't come. And she disguises herself and she goes into battle anyway, like Joan of Arc. And the one who commanded the armies of Sauron was this Lord of Angmar. This all sounds ridiculous, but just stay with me for a second. You're like, what is he talking about? Lord of Angmar? What in the world? But there was this like Lord of Angmar, and as the story went, no man could kill him. Like he was the fiercest, most evil warrior, and there was some spell over him that, like, if a man tried to kill him or slay him with their sword or whatever, they would die instead. Like they'd strike him with a sword and then they would just drop dead. So you can imagine, like, if that's your enemy, you're kind of in trouble. Like, you're like, how am I going to beat this guy? And so, sure enough, they're waging this giant battle, and Eowyn's in the middle of it, and her king just got slayed by the Lord Angmar. And she jumps in front of him as he's about to destroy the king's body. And she jumps in front of him and she says, stop. And she like pulls out her sword, and Lord the evil king, this evil king laughs at her and he says, you fool, no man can kill me. And she rips off her helmet and reveals that she is a woman. And she laughs at him and she says, I am no man. And she slays him down in that moment. And I was like, that's my image of Our Lady. Like, that's what I think. I'm waiting to walk into a Catholic church someday and not see Mary sitting there holding baby Jesus. I want to see her with like hair in the wind, helmet ripped off, like sword in the dragon's head. Like, that's what I want to see. That's what I think of when I think of Mary, as this fierce warrior. Like, that's who we go into battle with. I can follow that. That's amazing, right? Blessed Solanus Casey has this theology that he thought of Mary. He asked the question, what is it that made Satan fall? Like, as the story goes, Satan was an angel. He was a seraphim. He was the highest of angels. And the story goes that he fell due to pride. And battle broke out in heaven. And Michael waged, the archangel Michael waged God's angels versus the 1/3 of the angels that Satan took with him. And so he asked the question, he's like, I wonder what it was that made what made him jealous? Like, it was said he wanted to be like God, but he was an angel. He's smarter than us. He knew that was impossible. Like, that wouldn't be the thing that you would think, like, I want to be like God. I know that's impossible. So why would he be jealous of that? And Solanus Casey's theory is that it wasn't that he wanted to be like God. He wanted to be like Mary, meaning that Jesus showed Lucifer a vision of what was to come. He said, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to go on earth. We're going to create humanity. I'm going to go to earth. I'm going to be born of a woman. And by nature of the fact that I am born of her, she becomes the queen mother. She inherits the kingdom. And she becomes your queen. And what he was most jealous of was her womb. Because he comes out of her womb, she inherits the kingdom and the highest place in the kingdom. But not just that, woman is the only creature God has ever created, ever, that can actually create someone in the image and likeness of God. Like all of his other creation, all of the other creation can give birth, but squirrels are not made in the image and likeness of God. Ants are not made in the image and likeness of God. Only humanity is made in the image and likeness of God. And because humanity can procreate, angels cannot. They do not procreate. Because humanity can procreate, and quite literally, the image and likeness of God is born forth from that of the woman. He was jealous of that. He says, that's what I want. I want to be able to create like God creates. And an angel can't do that. And he became jealous of Mary. And so when it came to this, Jesus will be your king, and his mother, Mary, will be your queen. He looks at Mary and he says, I will not serve. And that's where the fall happens. And so where does he wage war on the face of this earth the most? On the womb, because that's what he hates the most. Who is it that has more power over him than, with the exception of Jesus himself? Mary, our mother. He hates her the most. And she always defeats him. if this is, I mean, I could go on and on and on about the significance of Mary. I'm just touching the surface here in terms of what we can learn from Mary. If there's three things I could say, it's that A, she's Queen Mother, take to her your intentions. B, she's the Ark of the Covenant. You win every battle with her. And C, Satan always loses to her. Go to Mary. Go to Mary with everything. She'll teach you to be a disciple. I'll leave you with this. If you ever wonder, like, okay, well, what makes Mary, like, if there was one final thing, I would tell you this. Mary wants nothing more than for you to come closer to her son. It's true. She's an ordinary, everyday woman of no significance if it were not for her son. So at the end of the day, it's her son who's most significant. Because you're right, if she just gave birth to anybody else, she'd be like the rest of us. But the fact that she gives birth to the Son, to God, she wants us to get close to him. That's her end goal, is everything. It's just like at the wedding at Cana, where she says to the people, she says they have no wine. And he says, what do you want me to do about it? And she said, do whatever he tells you. And she says the same to us, do whatever he tells you. Come and get close to my son. You look at her messages and private revelations from Fatima to Guadalupe to Lourdes, everything is all about come close to my son. I learned this lesson, again, hanging around Dennis, come full circle here. I learned this lesson, and this is when I became sold out, and I said, okay, I'm doing exactly what Dennis says. We had this little prayer group that had formed with Dennis as the leader, and I became a part of it. They had permission on Saturday mornings at the college campus in the Basilica to have their own private mass. And so basically they gave them the crypt of the basilica, the bottom floor, the basement, and they said, yeah, you can have it, but you got to provide your own priest, meaning you got to get a priest to agree to do private mass for you. And so we said, deal. And I go the first Saturday morning and I find out we have private mass, and I show up there, and our little group is there, and Dennis is at the head, and he says, we have some bad news. We have no priest this morning. He says, and the reason being is that there is some function this afternoon, with the seminarians, and all of the priests are tied up getting ready for this function with the seminarians and the bishop that's coming, and etc. He says, so everybody said, I'm not available this morning. And I thought, oh man, I got up on Saturday morning for nothing. Uh, and so I was ready to leave. I was like, I'll just go back to bed. I'm a college student. I can go back to bed at any time. Uh, and so I said, I'm about ready to leave. And Dennis is like, well, wait, where are you going? He says, we're going to have Mass. And I'm thinking, oh, something heretical is about to happen. We have no priest. How are we going to have Mass? And he's like, no, we're going to have Mass. He says, Mary wants us to receive her son today. She wants us to receive her son in the Mass. That's what she wants more than anything. So we're going to pray a rosary, and Mary's going to provide for us a priest. And I thought, this I've got to see. So I stick around, and we pray the rosary. And we go off to the side. The way that the crypt was shaped, it was like a cross. And over on the side of one of the wings of the cross was the Mary statue. So we go there, and we start praying by the statue. And I only point that out to say, like, I had no visibility about what was going on in the back because we were kind of on the wing. And around the third decade of the rosary, I start to hear voices in the background. And I get a little curious, and we're praying through the rosary. We get through the fourth decade, we get through the fifth decade, and there's still voices in the background talking. And Dennis says, well, that must be our priest. Will somebody go back and ask him to do Mass for us? And so I walk back there, and there were 3 people back there, and one of them was in a collar, and then he had 2 other people with him, and they were just standing back there talking. And I said, excuse me, I didn't want to presume anything. It could have been a deacon, could have been an Episcopalian. I said, so, excuse me, is one of you a Catholic priest? And he said, well, yeah, I am. And I said, oh, will you celebrate Mass for us? And he says, oh, no, I don't have any time. I just came down here this morning. I had a couple of friends in town with me. I wanted to show them this crypt and I was explaining a couple of things around. He says, I don't have time. I can't. Thank you very much for the invitation. And I said, well, wait, Father. I said, let me tell you the story just real quick. We were praying, and Mary and the rosary, and we prayed for a priest to come. And he said, oh, Mary sent me to you. And I said, yeah, that's what it looks like. He says, well, I have a problem then. He says, I need to go, but on the day of my ordination, in prayer, silently, in quiet, I said to Our Lady, I said, whatever you ask me to do, I will do for you. He said, and I've always tried to keep that promise. So I guess I have to celebrate Mass for you. And I said, awesome, that's amazing. He says, okay, I don't have any investments with me. So he says, do you have a key? Do you have anything? And we said, we'll get a key. We'll get you all hooked up, et cetera. He says to his friends, he's like, I'll catch up with you. Don't worry. I'll be there soon. And I sit down and start talking to him as others ran off to get him what he needed to celebrate Mass. And I said, Father, so what's your name? Where'd you come from? And he says, well, I should probably correct you because it'll make for a better story someday. He says, my name's not Father, it's Bishop. And he says, I'm not worried about not making it in time to that seminarian function because they can't start without me. So, uh, and he said, I was like, oh my gosh, we prayed for a priest and we got one of the successors to the apostles. We got a bishop. If we had asked for a bishop, we might have gotten the Pope. I mean, this was, and so sure enough, like he celebrated Mass for us, and he gave this beautiful homily on Our Lady and talked to us about like what he learned in that period of time. And then he joked at the end, he says, now, just so you know, throughout human history, there are times when priests will magically appear, like Padre Pio, for example, at times of need when people would pray and they needed a he's like, so if I go to the sacristy and I'm taking my vestments off and I don't come out, just know I probably disintegrated into thin air. But, you know, anyway, he did come out. It wasn't that cool of a story. But the whole point being that Mary's whole purpose, her whole purpose is to bring us to her Son. So if there's one thing I can tell you, it's like, guys, here's the shortcut, here's the secret. If you were only going to make one night of the mission, you got like the secret path to fastest, most efficient way to Jesus. Go to Mary. If you're not in the habit of always praying the rosary, pray it every day. Every day, grab this. I used to think this was the most boring, monotonous prayer. Now I love it. I mean, there have been times in my life where it's like, this is the only thing I can pray because of where I'm at. It was the most comforting thing. If you're not in the habit of praying the rosary and you're like, I don't know, 20 minutes, grab it, 5 minutes, pray a decade. Pray it throughout your day. Pray it while you drive. I grab sometimes a decade here, a decade there. But pray the rosary. You'll be amazed how quickly you get close to her Son. Go to her with everything. You'll be amazed at how she grows your faith. It's night one of our parish mission, and I know to make it easy on you, since I challenged you to pray the rosary, we're going to pray the rosary. So I'm going to hand things off to Deacon from here.